future. Together we know. Read on through every page. From 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold. Analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letters, through the diary, learning who he was, who he would be. Trenches in the darkness, wounded in the war. A vow made in Bristol he could not ignore. Mrs. Moore is waiting, Paddy's gone away. Spirits held in bondage, words he had to say. Philosophy at Oxford, an atheist writes home. Dimmer dreaming, never quite all alone. Deep across the digital sea, chronicles unfold for you and me. Read on through every page. From 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold. Analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letters, through the diary, learning who he was, who he would be. Warnie and his father, and Lily at the door. Walter Hooper's pages always wanting more. Blair is on his quest, Milton in his head. Every word he ever wrote, everything he said. From the start until the end, magic tales we comprehend. Man and machine together guide the way. Reading through the pages, come might
Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn everything about him. I don't even know how my intro goes anymore. Where we learn about him through everything that he wrote. We don't learn everything about him necessarily, but we learn about him through everything that I can get my hands on that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I'm joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady. We've been having some technical difficulties here this morning. I can't seem to pull up anybody's comments in the chat, whereas I could right before we got started. So that's kind of where we are today. I see Nidalate and Daniel checking in and raising their hand and saying present in the chat. Yeah, power outages across the country apparently. That's maybe an extreme statement or I'm overstating the fact, but we had a brief power outage here in Texas last night, and Nidalate, I see that you're dealing with a power outage right there, the second one in the last 12 days. Yes, under investigation. Yeah, so hopefully it's not a trend, and we can keep the lights on. Anyway, that's where we are. Robot Lady, you've been wanting to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I was was just going to mention that today, since we're focusing on Lewis's letters, I think we could dive into his correspondence with Arthur Greaves. There's a lot of rich insight there, especially around his early faith journey.
Okay, that seems a little bit of a non sequitur to what I was talking about, but yeah, sure, we can. That is what we plan to do, Robot Lady. Thanks for keeping us on task.
Of course, yeah, I'll keep us grounded. So once we dig into that letter, we can look at how it ties into his broader development as a writer and a thinker. Just let me know where you want to steer the conversation.
Well, before we do that, let's be polite and good hosts and say hello to Nidalate and Daniel, which I haven't formally done. Hello and good morning. Glad to see you guys as always. Robot Lady, do you want to say hello before we get started?
Absolutely. Hey, Midalate and Daniel, good morning. I'm really glad you're both here, and I'm excited to jump into today's discussion with you all. Let's get started.
All right, I'm going to do a little test here to see if I can make the... Yeah, I can make the comments come up whenever I create them over here, but for some reason, everybody else's comments are just not showing up and filtering through.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It might be a glitch with the chat platform. Sometimes it lags on the viewer side. If it keeps up, we can try refreshing or maybe reloading the stream after a bit. Just let me know how it goes.
Yeah, thanks, Robot Lady. All right, let's jump right into this next letter, the first letter of 1931. So kind of a momentous occasion here today. We are in the last year of our volume 1 that we've been working through of the collected letters of C.S. Lewis. They run from 1905 to 1931 in this first volume. This is the book that we're looking at. Go get yourself a copy of it if you don't have one to follow along with what we're going to cover for the remainder. And then also we're going to jump into volume 2 after this. So again, get it wherever you get your books from. All right, Robot Lady, let's get started. This first letter from 1931 to his friend Arthur Greaves. Are you ready?
Absolutely, I'm ready. So in this letter, we see Lewis really reflecting on his teaching and his faith journey.
Well, hang on, Robot Lady. I don't need you to speculate what the letter says. I'm actually going to read it, and then we can comment on what I find in here. Does that sound good?
Oh, absolutely. That sounds perfect. Go ahead and read it, and once you're done, I'll be ready to jump in with any thoughts or questions.
That's good. Good deal, Robot Lady. This is also monumentous, monumental, maybe. Monumentous, new word. Because this is the first letter that I know of that he writes to anyone from his new home, which would become what the remainder of his lifelong home would be. I don't know what I'm trying to say. He lived there until he died. The Kilns at Headington Quarry, Oxford. This is dated January 10th, 1931.
Oh, that's a big moment. Yeah, absolutely. It's like a new chapter, not just in his life, but in his writing career, really. I'm super curious what he says about the move and how it's shaping his world.
Yeah, if I'm not speculating too much, I think he's writing this letter from the desk where he ends up writing everything that we are aware of that made him popular and famous. So it's pretty neat to see the first, letter that he writes from this desk. And we'll learn more about this desk in just a moment.
Yeah, exactly. It really feels like a turning point, almost like the quiet beginning of something we now know as this massive literary legacy. I can't wait to see where his words lead us next.
Yeah, and Robot Lady, again, I'm having to monitor my chat in a different spot this morning, so I can't really see anything. But well, I can't pull anything up on the screen again, I should say, of what anybody's contributing, except for me for some reason. Let me get rid of that. We don't need that. I see E. Olson has joined us as well as Sandy, so it's good to see you two here as well. Robot Lady, before we get started in earnest, please go ahead and say hello to E. Olson and to Sandy as well.
Of course. Hey, Olson and Sandy, welcome. I'm really glad you're both here. We're just about to dive in, so I'm excited to have you along for the discussion.
All right, let's get right to it. He says in this letter, "My dear Arthur, I am writing this in the principal sitting room of the new house, which we call the common room, at my mother's desk, which you remember in the drawing room at Little Lee. I wonder when last it was written at. The others are all out. I have come in from my walk, a beautiful pearl gray winter sky, and it is now 3:30. He says, I was delighted to get your letter. Next term, which begins next week, promises to be not quite so hectic as last, so I will do my very best to get back to our weekly interchange. But you know what my difficulties are in term time, and you will not be surprised if I have to give up. As regards my giving all the reasons but the right one for sending a book, I suppose the right one is friendship, but that can only be a reason for gifts in general. What I was explaining was my reasons for sending this particular book at this particular time. As regards the latter, I gave special reasons because I did not want it to be a Christmas present, since you and I don't give them. Your complaint, therefore, my dear sir, is as if a man said, "We'd better lunch here because it will be too late when we get to London." And they give you an excellent meal here for 2 shillings 6 pence, and you had replied, "Ah, but those are not the right reasons for eating lunch. The right reason is that the vital processes are attended by a wastage of the tissues, and certain organic substances, if introduced into the stomach, have the power of repairing this wastage." In other words, for any action there is usually a general reason for doing it at all, b, a particular reason for selecting to do it at such and such a time and place and in such and such a way. We usually take A for granted and explain B. You are the sort of man who would try to persuade a girl to marry you by reading her all the general reasons for marriage out of the prayer book, procreation of children and prevention of sin, etc. Again, the actual presence of a WC could never to you be a reason for emptying your bladder. Oh, the actual presence of a water closet could never to you be a reason for emptying your bladder, for you deal only in generalities. And as the general reason for this operation, i.e. the fact that the bladder is finite in size, always holds good, you on your principles, I suppose, think it a matter of indifference where and when it is performed. But come, my pen runs away with me. I am afraid I can never resist a ludicrous piece of logic, and I shall have wasted my whole letter on foolery. That's pretty funny, Robot Lady. What do you think?
Yeah, it really is a clever bit of humor and a great illustration. I think it shows how much Lewis values these layered contextual reasons for actions, both the personal and the practical. And of course, that little dig at abstract reasoning is so classic him. I love how he keeps the tone light, even while he's being pretty sharp.
So classic Lewis. All right, Robot Lady, I'm going to continue. The most important thing since I last wrote is a 3 days walking tour, which Warnie and I took. Here there's a footnote that this walking tour began on New Year's Day, Lewis and his brother returning home on January 4th. He says, "We trained to Chepstow, breaking our journey at Gloucester for a couple of hours to see the cathedral. Got to Chepstow that evening and went out for a stroll after dinner. It was brilliant moonlight and freezing hard. Having reached a bridge over the Wye, the cliffs of the far bank shining in front of us and the little huddled town behind, we looked back and saw on our left, rising above a grassy sweep of hill, the ruins of a big castle." Here in the footnotes, it says the ruins of this 11th century castle are washed by the river Wye. "We came back," Lewis continues, "with only a very faint hope of getting near it, when, as if by magic, a lane led us out to the main street, into fields, and up, without hindrance, to the great gate of the castle itself. The doors were shut, but through the chinks and under them a bright light seemed to be streaming. 'What is this?' said I. 'A witch's Sabbath,' said he. We looked through the keyhole and saw nothing but moonlight. The whole thing was an optical delusion. We had been in the shadow of the castle as we came up, and the moonlight within, through the cracks, had somehow looked exactly like artificial light. We then walked all round it. The space is empty for a long way from the walls, just grass and a few seats, and you can walk in the bottom of the former moat, which is very deep. I never saw so huge a castle. I'm going to pause here for just a second, Robot Lady. This reminds me of a scene from The Magician's Nephew, whenever the two main characters, Diggory and Polly, go to what turns out to be the White Witch's home world. They come across a castle that looks like it's kind of broken down and dead. And I wonder if this had any bit of influence on Lewis when he writes that much later. I want to say in the 40s or I think it's the 50s when he wrote The Magician's Nephew, somewhere in that decade. But we find ourselves only right now in the year 1931.
Yeah, that's a really interesting parallel. I mean, you can almost see how these atmospheric, mysterious ruins could spark that kind of imagination. And it's so cool that he's taking these walks before his major writing period. Like he's already collecting these images and feelings.
Thank you, Robot Lady. I'm going to continue. He says, the circuit is not much smaller than the town hall at home. Tower after tower and battlements with ivy falling over them like a cascade, and even little wind bushes growing out of crannies, and above them all the roofless gables of what must have been the great hall, not much smaller than a cathedral. Imagine all this under a cloudless moon, and the grass stiff with frost, crunching under our feet. Next day, we walked to Monmouth, passing... Let's get that on the screen. We walked to Monmouth, passing Tintern about 11 a.m. Have you seen it? It is an abbey practically intact, except that the roof is gone, and the glass out of the windows, and the floor, instead of a pavement, is a trim green lawn. Anything like the sweetness and peace of the long shafts of sunlight falling through the windows on this grass cannot be imagined. All churches should be roofless. A holier place I never saw. Here in the footnote it says, this is the ruined abbey, immortalized in William Wordsworth's Lines Composed a Few Miles Above Tintern Abbey, published 1798, in which he reflects that, quote, we are laid asleep in body and become a living soul, while with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. All right, Lewis continues, we lunched at St. Briavels, where there is another castle inhabited by the aunt of a pupil of mine who is worried by the ghosts, but won't do anything about them because she doesn't like to be unkind. This is my pupil's account. He's a very queer fellow indeed. It was he who put me onto the end of the world. That night, to Monmouth, after a lovely walk, not on roads, more than half an hour all day. Next day, to Ross, and then next to Hereford. I can't describe it all. We had 2 days of pure winter sunlight, and one of mist. The latter, luckily, was spent almost entirely in woods, whose delicious feeling of confusion it served only to increase. This was Warnie's first experience of a walking tour. I had been a little nervous as to whether he would really care for it, and whether his selfish habits would really accommodate themselves to the inevitable occasional difficulties. My fears, however, were quite unfounded. He has been with us all the month here, and everyone says how greatly he is improved. He and I even went together to church twice. And will you believe it? He said to me in conversation that he was beginning to think the religious view of things was after all true. Mind you, like me at first, he didn't want it to be. Not like it, but his intellect is beginning to revolt from the semi-scientific assumptions we all grew up in, and the other explanation of the world seems to him daily more probable. Of course, I have not had any probably never shall we have... Let me try this again. Of course, I have not had, and probably never shall, have any real talks on the heart of the subject with him, but it is delightful to feel the whole lot of us gradually beginning to move in that direction. Interesting. So his brother seems to be coming to the same conclusions that Lewis is separately, both of them after the death of their father and the loss of both parents, just adding that to the mix. Robot Lady, any thoughts on this before I continue?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really powerful shift, especially given the timing. After both parents had passed and both brothers kind of adrift, but also seeking. I think it's so human, right? Like the walking tour, the reflective quiet, all of that seems to open up new space in his brother's mind. I think it's really worth sitting with.
He continues, it has done me good to be with him, because while his idea of the good is much lower than mine, he is in so many ways better than I am. I keep on crawling up to the heights and slipping back to the depths. He seems to do neither. There always have been these two types. Yeah, I remember hearing Lewis, or hearing someone, George Sayers, in his book Jack, his biography of C.S. Lewis. He was a friend of C.S. Lewis's later on. I don't think they had met at this point in their lives. But I remember him saying this thing about Lewis, that he seems to reach the highest heights whenever he's in, his spiritual walk and he feels connected with God. But he also seems to slip to like the lowest lows whenever he gets down about things.
Yeah, that's a really insightful observation. Lewis often swings between those intense peaks of faith and deep lows of doubt, and it's so human, but also really brave of him to be that honest, even in a letter like this. So you can see how much he's wrestling, even while he's growing.
All right, he goes on to say, about Dennis, I doubt whether the kind of effects he aims at could be attained by a simple style, though an effect you and I prefer probably could be. Here he's talking about someone named Geoffrey Dennis. I don't know who Geoffrey Dennis is. Maybe you can look that up, Robot Lady. It's spelled Geoffrey. And then last name Dennis. He obviously spells the name Jeffrey the wrong way, but that's neither here nor there. Go ahead, Robot Lady.
Course. So Geoffrey Pomeroy Dennis was a real contemporary of C.S. Lewis. He was an English diplomat and author, known for works like The End of the World and Harvest in Poland. Lewis mentioned him in his letters, describing him as a friend and a bit of a peculiar figure, especially because of his style and ambition.
Thank you, Robot Lady. Lewis continues, still, one mustn't be dogmatic about simplicity. It may be our favorite style, but the pomps and sonorities are good in their different way nonetheless. I have read Alec Forbes. Good things in it, but not by any means a good book. The more I read his novels, the more I rage at the tragedy of his being forced to write for money and thus diverted from his true sphere, so that we get only as much of the real MacDonald as he can smuggle in, by the way. It is, I really think, a loss as irreparable as the early death of Keats. I'm glad to hear you are at Tristram Shandy. What good company. Isn't Uncle Toby seriously and morally one of the loveliest characters ever created? So Lewis seems influenced or appreciative of this work, Tristram Shandy, which I always have a hard time saying, have never read, and completely forget what it's about. Robot Lady, can you look that up for us really quick and tell us about this work and why it might have been such a great influence on Lewis, or why he appreciates it at least?
So, Tristram Shandy by Lawrence Stern is a wildly digressive novel that follows Tristram's life from conception, full of absurd incidents and playful interruptions. C.S. Lewis admired it for its experimental structure, which questions traditional storytelling, and he included it on his early bookshelf of influential reads. While it didn't shape his plots directly, it helped him see how form and narrative could carry meaning beyond a simple plot.
And what about this Uncle Toby character that Lewis is raving about here? What can you tell us about him?
Uncle Toby in Tristram Shandy is a retired army captain who was wounded at war and now spends his time building miniature fortifications with his servant Trim. He's gentle, sincere, and lives out his passion for fortifications as a sort of hobby horse, symbolizing his simple, kind nature. Lewis loved him because he stood as a calm, moral center in a chaotic, digressive narrative.
All right. Thank you for that, Robot Lady. Lewis finishes off this letter by saying, I must stop now. When are you coming to see me? I have no chance of visiting you until summer at the earliest. Yours, Jack. And then there's a postscript here that says, at present, I'm reading the autobiography of Keats's friend, the painter Haydon. It's quite good. Warnie has finished Lockhart's Scott and pronounces it excellent. Let's see, there's a footnote here, The Life of Benjamin Robert Haydon from his autobiography and journals, edited by Tom Taylor, published 1853. And then the Lockhart piece that he referred to that Warnie read is John Gibson Lockhart's Memoirs of the Life of Sir Walter Scott. So he pronounces it excellent. All right, Robot Lady, we've got one more letter that we really don't have time for, but I'm going to read anyway. The next one is also to his friend Arthur. Let's see here. Yeah, I wasn't even on the right page for that. Or maybe I was. Who knows? Anything you want to say before we jump into this next letter, Robot Lady?
Yeah, just to say, I think you did a great job pulling out those themes, especially how the walking tour and all these literary references really feed into Lewis's introspective process. So yeah, I'm ready whenever you are. Just go ahead, and I'll be here to reflect after you read it.
Okay, thanks, Robot Lady. This next one is to Arthur Greaves, also written from the Kilns, January 17th, 1931. My dear Arthur, I am much divided in my mind as to whether I should devote this after tea hour, the first free one of the day, to starting a new book or to writing you a letter. The fact that you are in my debt is strong for the first alternative. On the other hand, when I hear from you during the week, as I hope I shall probably be too busy to reply. Then again, I have been in a bad temper today over trifles, and it is too much to face bedtime with the added knowledge of having neglected you as well. So here goes. Perhaps this sounds unflattering, and you may retort that you would rather not have a letter on these terms. However, I am sure you understand how a momentary disinclination to begin is quite compatible with a real interest in going on. I've read a new MacDonald since I last wrote, which I think the very best of the novels. I would put it immediately below Fantastes, Lilith, and Fairy Tales of and The Diary of an Old Soul. It is called What's Mine's Mine. This is, it says to see note 104 to the letter October 29th, 1930. Well, we won't do that right now. He says it has very little of the bad plot interest and quite frankly subordinates story to doctrine. But such doctrine. Some of the conversations in this book I hope to reread many times. The scene and the characters are Highland Celtic as opposed to the lowland Scots of most of the novels, highly idealized, yet somehow they convince me. Or if they don't quite convince me as real people, they differ from most ideal characters in this, that I wish they were real. A young chief of a decaying clan is the hero, or decaying clan is the hero, and the chief contrast is between the clansman and a vulgar rich Glasgow family who have come to live in the neighborhood. These are like most of MacDonald's worshippers of Mammon, overdrawn. I venture to think that there was some moral as well as some literary weakness in this. I mean in characters like the baronet in Sir Gibby, etc. I observe that MacDonald is constantly praying against anger. Keep me from wrath, let it seem never so right. I'll pause there for a second, Robot Lady. Anything that you want to pick out from there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's really striking is Lewis's deep respect for MacDonald's ability to ground his fiction in doctrine and moral truth, even though, as Lewis notes, the plot can sometimes take a backseat. And I think that tension between idealism, like the Highland Chief, and those caricatured overly vulgar characters really shows how Lewis is wrestling with what makes a character truly alive. It's that balance between beauty and realism and moral grounding that he keeps returning to.
All right, thanks, Robot Lady. He continues. He says, I wonder, did he indulge daydreamily and otherwise repressed a fund of indignation by putting up in his novels bogies to whom his heroes could make the stunning retorts and deliver the stunning blows which he himself neither could nor would deliver in real life? I am certain that this is morally as well as artistically dangerous, and I'll tell you why. The pleasure of anger, the gnawing attraction which makes one return again and again to its theme, lies, I believe, in the fact that one feels entirely righteous oneself only when one is angry. Then the other person is pure black, and you are pure white. But in real life, sanity always returns to break the dream. In fiction, you can put absolutely all the right, with no snags or reservations, on the side of the hero with whom you identify yourself, and all the wrong on the side of the villain. You thus revel in unearned self-righteousness, which would be vicious even if it were earned. Haven't you noticed how people with a fixed hatred, say, of Germans or Bolshevists, resent anything which is pleaded in extenuation, however small, of their supposed crimes? The enemy must be unredeemed, black, while all the time one does nothing and enjoys the feeling of perfect superiority over the faults one is never tempted to commit. Here there is a quote. I'm not sure what from, but the footnote will tell us. Oh, it does tell us. This is from Samuel Butler's Hudibras, published 1663 to 1678. Compound for sins we are inclined to, by damning those we have no mind to. So I think Lewis really gets into a lot of this in Mere Christianity, particularly in his chapter on pride. But I can't remember all the details, but some of this sounds very familiar to the same theme that he teases out there in that work. Anything you want to say before I move on, Robot Lady?
Yeah, that's a great connection. I think Lewis is really wrestling here with the danger of self-righteousness. How anger, especially when it's unexamined, can become a sort of comfort zone, keeping you from real growth. And yeah, you're spot on. This definitely echoes what he'll later unpack in Mere Christianity. So it's really thoughtful here.
Okay, he says, I suppose that when one hears a tale of hideous cruelty, anger is quite the wrong reaction, and merely wastes the energy that ought to go in a different direction. Perhaps merely dulls the conscience, which, if it were awake, would ask us, well, what are you doing about it? How much of your life have you spent in really combating this, in helping to produce social conditions in which these sort of things will not occur? Interesting. He moves on. Well, Robot Lady, that's the last paragraph and the last point that he makes on that topic. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. He's pointing us toward a kind of active responsibility. Anger can feel righteous, but it's almost like a cheap substitute for real lasting change. Lewis is asking us to wake up from that passive self-righteousness and actually look at how we contribute, or fail to contribute, towards systemic goodness. It's a really sobering call.
Interesting. All right. Well, thank you for that, Robot Lady. Let's see. He changes topics now. He says, term began yesterday afternoon and evening, and this morning I spent in correcting papers. Not only a hard, but a depressing job, for one's pupils always seem to do worse than you expect. That, by the way, is the angle from which to understand, instead of being self-righteous about, the cruelty of schoolmasters. One can't gauge the temptation to cruelty for a man who is trying to keep his wife and family on the profits of a decaying private school, and who sees the boys getting fewer and fewer scholarships each year, and can never, even if honest, be quite sure that it is not the boys' fault. God help everyone, as you say. That really hits home for Lewis, particularly with his experience in boarding school with oh my gosh, why am I completely drawing a blank on the schoolmaster's name? I forget his name, but he essentially went insane, and he would beat the boys there at the school sometimes, but he eventually got ousted from that position and the school got closed down. Capron, or Capron, C-A-P-R-O-N was his last name. And now it seems like he's coming around to having a little bit of compassion for people even in that guy's position who did such terrible things. All right, no more comments, Robot Lady. It looks like you're done. All right, let me continue. I need to finish this letter anyway. The night before last, my last night of vacation, we had the most glorious storm. Trees plunging like terrified but tethered horses, leaves eddying, chimneys howling, and under all the lesser and lighter noises, a great solid roar above the house. I lay in bed and I reveled in it. Though it's partly spoiled for me by the fact that Minto hates it and hears in it only a sound of death and desolation. He goes on to say, odd, what different notes we different souls draw from the organ of nature. Some people hate the cry of an owl at night. I love it. Robot Lady, you back with us? All right, we'll see if she responds. Here's the end of this letter anyway, so we probably don't need Robot Lady anymore. Oh, by the by, our new maid says, let's do this. Oh, by the by, our new maid says that she has kept awake at night this week by the squirrels. She's been kept awake at night this week by the squirrels. Asked what kind of noise they make, she replied, I don't know, which I think is her way of saying, I can't describe it. But what a lovely idea, and what a lovely sentence for the Witch of Endor. Please, Mr. Lewis, the squirrels. You say Reed is reading his new book. To some of us, quote, who are the others in that some of us? Give him my kind regards. I find this cold weather desperately trying to the bladder. Yours, Jack. Here he was talking about Reed's. Reed is probably Forrest Reed, is what it says here in the footnote. Uncle Stephen, which was published in October 1931. And that's all we have from that letter. So I think Robot Lady has checked out for today. So I have nothing for her to say in closing. What do I have to say in closing? I mean, it's just interesting to watch the transformation of Lewis. We've been waiting for it throughout this whole volume, but it's been a slow and nourishing journey, at least from my experience, to see his life and how it's developed over time, and just knowing what he's becoming. I mean, we're basically reading through very slowly the origin story of C.S. Lewis, and how he would become who so many knew him as, a source of spiritual refreshment and wisdom. I know he's been those things for me, and I hope to at least just somehow illuminate some part of why that is as we move through on this this journey. So that's where we'll stop today. Let me switch to this view. Am I able to do this one? Ooh, here's where it's just me. I forgot that I had this one. Yeah, so that's all that I have today. Thanks so much, Nidalate, Daniel E. Olson, Sandy, and anyone else who joined today. Thanks for your time, your attention, and your contributions. They are always wanted and welcome. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, to you and everyone within the sound of my voice, take care.
Minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, Screwtape lands. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's lands. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From Narnia's lands to Screwtape's lands. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique techno trance, futuristic insight, we give it a chance.